It's Wednesday, August 4th, and this is now on HNN.
Although it's a disappointing day, it's not like the end of the season.
The Education Department is requiring student athletes and athletic staff to be fully vaccinated in order to participate in school sports.
We need governors and municipalities to get emergency rental assistance funds out.
Lawmakers are working to extend a lifeline for millions of Americans impacted by the pandemic. I'm Skylar Henry at the White House, where President Biden and other officials are extending the eviction moratorium.
A story you've got to see to believe. A case of mistaken identity keeps a man locked up at the Hawaii State Hospital for 2 years.
Nothing's done. It's just quietly swept underneath the rug, and we don't set the record straight.
Plus, People magazine is highlighting the trials and triumphs of one of America's greatest Olympians. These stories and more coming up on This Is Now.
Good afternoon. Thanks for watching This Is Now. You got Jonathan and Ashley here coming to you from the H&N Digital Center. So those daily COVID numbers being reported by the State Department of Health are holding steady in the 300s.
The state is reporting 346 new infections today. The breakdown by island shows the Big Island with 63 cases, Kauai with 5, 29 on Maui, 223 on Oahu, and 26 people diagnosed out of state. And new today, because of the surge in COVID cases, the State Education Department is requiring all student athletes, athletic staff, and volunteers to be fully vaccinated in order to participate in school-sanctioned sports this school year. Officials say the start of the fall athletic season is being delayed to give anyone who is unvaccinated time to get their shots. So here are the dates to remember. By August 20th, proof of full or partial vaccination must be submitted to the school's principal in order to initially qualify to participate in sports. Then, by September 24th, that's the deadline, proof of full vaccination must be provided to participate. Keep in mind that full vaccination means it's been at least 2 weeks after your second dose or 2 weeks after receiving the one-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Here's Chris Chun, the head of the Hawaii High School Athletic Association.
I'm obviously disappointed with having to delay the start of the season. At the same time, I'm kind of encouraged that we actually still have a target date to resume. There is a plan in place to get kids vaccinated. Although it's a disappointing day, it's not like the end of the season. So in that respect, I'm kind of still hopeful.
The DOE says there will be exemptions for religious or medical reasons with documentation. If an exemption is granted, the participating individual will be required to take a COVID test twice a week. Interim Superintendent Keith Hayashi says this decision was not made lightly, but the alternative was canceling the season outright, which they didn't want to do.
Some interesting business news being reported by our Howard Dykes. Hawaiian Airline CEO Peter Ingram says fall bookings do not yet show signs of new COVID-inspired travel fear. Ingram cites new evidence of international travel returning in the next several months. He sees booking data we don't see. Well, some airlines canceled hundreds of flights this week, frustrating a lot of passengers. CBS travel editor Peter Greenberg had a lot to say about this morning on his Facebook forum.
You've seen it, it's all over the news. The ridiculous, ludicrous, and draconian, if you will, cancellations and delays in the U.S. route network system of the airlines. Spirit Airlines canceling 50% of their schedule yesterday. On Monday, American Airlines canceled 270 flights. They said it was weather related. Well, not totally. This is a perfect story in which weather was a part of the problem, but it wasn't the only problem. Of the 270 flights that American canceled, 120 of them were canceled because they couldn't find a crew. So let me put this in some historical context. Traditionally, and this is pre-pandemic, airlines have always been challenged to get enough flight crew, meaning cockpit and cabin, at the end of the month because people bid for their flights, they fly a certain number of hours, some of them exceed them, and there's a labor shortage usually at the end of every month, which they can fill with usually, junior flight attendants and people who fly reserve. That's not what happened here. The shortages happened not at the end of the month, but at the beginning of the month, where that never happens. So that gives you an idea of the severity of the problem we're dealing with, right? And it's going to continue through the month of August, guys. So just be ready for that.
We're still waiting to find out how this will apply to Hawaii, but the CDC has issued a new ban on evictions that will keep millions of people in their homes, at least temporarily. Skylar Henry has more.
The CDC says a rush of evictions could hurt efforts to slow the coronavirus pandemic. So the agency issued a new 60-day moratorium on evictions until October 3rd. It covers areas with substantial and high levels of COVID-19 transmission. That's about 90% of the country. Missouri Congresswoman Cori Bush, who camped out on the steps of the U.S. Capitol protesting for an extension of the moratorium, called it a victory for families.
Children will be able to start school in the next few weeks and not have to worry about where they're going to sleep.
The extension gives state and local governments more time to distribute the more than $46 billion already set aside for renters.
We need governors and municipalities to get emergency rental assistance funds out. That is what the point of this moratorium is. It's to buy time.
The White House had insisted, even as late as Monday of this week, that it didn't have the legal authority to extend the moratorium. But President Biden changed his mind after intense pressure from progressives in his own party.
I asked the CDC to go back and consider other options that may be available to them.
The president says he made the decision, even though he expects legal challenges to the new moratorium.
At a minimum, by the time it gets litigated, it will probably give some additional time while we're getting that $45 billion out to people who are, in fact, behind in the rent and don't have the money.
The Supreme Court ruled in June that the moratorium could stay in place temporarily. Skylar Henry, CBS News, the White House.
Hawaii's largest hospitals announced a vaccine mandate for employees, and the move is backed by the Healthcare Association of Hawaii. Here's Hilton Rathel, the head of the organization.
I know they're requiring for their employees, some like Queens even requiring it for some of their visitors. And playing devil's advocate a little bit, is that fair? Should we limit access to these hospitals to people? Shouldn't they have the right to choose?
Well, we do believe that people have the right to choose, but we also need to protect all of the patients in our hospitals and all the employees. And so while this pandemic is still raging, and it is indeed raging, we have 150 people in our hospitals now with COVID. The positivity rate continues to go up. We are having daily infection rates of 200 to 300. And that is telling us that the worst of this wave of the pandemic is yet in front of us.
Why was this needed, though? Could you give us perhaps some numbers as to how many healthcare employees were not vaccinated or were resistant to it?
Well, overall, we have about 85% of the doctors, nurses, and other staff in healthcare that are vaccinated. Now, it does vary from facility to facility, so that has been a very, very good response. However, we still have a number of individuals, too many, who have not yet made that decision. And in order to better protect the patients in our facilities to ensure that we have the safest possible environment, we are calling for mandatory vaccinations for all our staff. The challenge is that the vaccination rate has stalled out despite all the information that's been provided, despite all the education, despite all the incentives. We have stalled out in getting, and we're not getting enough people vaccinated. We need to get more healthcare workers vaccinated, and we need to get more of our public vaccinated. We were hoping very much that we did not have to get to this point, but unfortunately, we don't see any other real way of protecting enough of our healthcare workers and the people in the state of Hawaii.
So have you heard about this yet? There was this man who was mistakenly locked up in a state mental hospital after police wrongfully identified him as a wanted criminal. This went on for 2.5 years, and now advocates say the state tried to cover it up. Here's Lynn Kwana.
In 2017, a Honolulu police officer arrested a man sleeping outside Safe Haven in Chinatown for a probation violation. The problem was that man was never on probation. This is Thomas Castleberry, a 49-year-old convicted drug user, car thief, and burglar. He's been in prisons in Honolulu, Arizona, and Alaska. This is Joshua Spriestersbach, the 50-year-old man who was wrongly identified as Castleberry and booked for his warrant. It appears no one bothered to compare the pictures or fingerprints when they booked Spriestersbach.
The real Thomas Castleberry had been arrested in 2006. He had been booked in OCCC in 2006. He had been fingerprinted by the police in 2006. He'd been photographed by the police in 2006. They had the real Thomas Castleberry's identification, fingerprints, and photograph online.
When Spriestersbach kept denying he was Castleberry in court, he was deemed delusional and committed to the state hospital. They forcibly injected him with drugs.
Anytime he refused to comply with the requirement that Thomas Castleberry had, he was injected with an antipsychotic. Anytime he asserted that he was Joshua Spriestersbach and not Thomas Castleberry, he was punished for trying to stand up and assert who he was.
His sister, Vedanta Griffith, says the family had been looking for him for years while he was locked up under a different name. They thought he was dead. It took 2.5 years before the state admitted he was telling the truth. A closed hearing in the judge's chambers resulted in his immediate release. With just 50 cents in his pocket, he found his way back to safe haven, but the court records still don't acknowledge the error or state that he is not Thomas Castleberry.
Nothing's done. It's just quietly swept underneath the rug. And we don't set the record straight. We don't put on an entry saying, guess what, we got this wrong. Can you please correct the records?
The Hawaii Innocence Project has filed a petition to have the court records changed. Spriestersbach has moved back to his sister's home in Vermont, but he does not leave the property.
Afraid that if there's any incident where law enforcement is around, that he might be taken away. So he's pretty apprehensive about being anywhere where there could be law enforcement.
No date yet has been set for a court hearing on the petition. I'm Lynn Kawano, Hawaii News Now.
Aloha on this Wednesday, typical trade wind weather continues. That means you see these clouds upstream, they'll be pushing into those windward areas with a few scattered showers today, mainly for those early morning and overnight hours. Leeward sides will see lots of sunshine. Now we're still cyclone free in the central Pacific here at home, but in the East Pacific we're tracking two systems that could bring us some rain. They're not going to bring us anything in the way of severe weather because they'll be heading into northerly cooler waters, and that's going to make them fall apart. So while there will not be significant weather threats, we could see some rainfall increasing sometime around Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, and we do need the rain. We're also going to get those breezy winds continue into the weekend. We're talking 15 to 25 today, 15 to 20 for the remainder of the week into the weekend. So lots of sunshine expected, high temperatures running to near 90, lighter winds, warmer temperatures due in Monday and Tuesday. Keep it here on Hawaii News Now. We'll have all your severe weather updates.
Firefighters on the Big Island have been battling a wildfire for 6 days now with help from Army helicopters dropping water. Experts call it a once-in-50-years event. The fire started on Parker Ranch, which lost over 32,000 acres. They estimate more than 50,000 total acres have burned, which would make it the largest in state history. The ranch is now shifting to recovery mode, relocating cattle, researching future prevention measures, and accelerating reforestation efforts. Despite the land damage and destroyed homes, firefighters say it could have been much worse. Recent research from UH suggests that we should consider limiting our water use from Oahu's primary aquifer. Casey Lund has more.
This research is all about looking ahead and revisiting some of the limits that we place on withdrawals from the Pu'uloa or Pearl Harbor aquifer. It provides more than 2/3 of Oahu's drinking water and feeds places like this, Semita Farm, a small but very vital and important piece of land that produces more than 90% of the state's watercress. You can bet these folks understand the importance of preserving and protecting this natural resource.
We believe that this farm represents so much more than just the watercress we're proud to cultivate. For us, it's a source of inspiration for artists, for musicians. It's about culture and education. And our crew, they work so hard every day to nourish the islands with fresh watercress, and so many farms around the islands work so hard to produce food for the islands, but we really have to protect our natural resources. And I think Hawaii and the global community needs to, make some tough choices in the coming years about whether we want green golf courses or green food on our plates.
Emi Suzuki's family has been running this farm for generations. Their livelihood is dependent on the aquifer and a healthy watershed. The farm has been an important partner in the latest round of research from the Ikewai Project and people like Leah Bremer from the UHERO Environmental Policy and Planning Group and the Water Resources Research Center. Their most recent findings show that while we aren't currently drawing too much water from the aquifer, if we continue to withdraw from this water source at the legal limit that's currently set, many of the wells in the aquifer may become unusable for public water supply.
And too much has to be defined thinking about the trade-offs, right? When we pump water for drinking, we'll see a reduction in spring flow. And spring flow has already declined a lot into the future. But so some of the things we can do, we can conserve water in the household, in landscaping. We can start to reuse water more. We can support work of the Ko'olau Watershed Partnership and others in protecting our watersheds. And we also just need to have more conversations about how do we manage these different ways that people use and value water and make those tough decisions.
Of course, we just scratched the surface of this research. It's important and interesting stuff. You should check it out. We have a link to the full findings at hawaiinewsnow.com. Reporting at Sumida Farm, I'm Casey Lund. Now back to you.
All right, we still got a lot more to talk about, and so does the internet. So here's what is buzzing online. A beauty store brand is teaming up with the big box retailer Target. It announced it's joining forces with Ulta Beauty to bring mini shops into Target locations. The shop-in-a-shop concept will be located near its existing Target Beauty section and will feature more than 50 cosmetic brands. The joint venture, called Ulta Beauty at Target, oh, what an original name there, launches this month with more than 100 Target stores taking part and at Target.com. The plan is to extend this to a total 800 Target locations in the future.
And check this out, Mattel has unveiled 6 new Barbie dolls to honor individuals leading the fight against COVID-19. The dolls include Amy O'Sullivan, a nurse who treated the first COVID patient in Brooklyn and became ill herself, Dr. Audrey Sue Cruz, an Asian American physician who helped fight racial bias and discrimination, and Professor Sarah Gilbert, who helped develop the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. The company will donate $5 for each doll sold at Target to the First Responders Children's Fund. And gymnast Simone Biles is on the cover of the upcoming issue of People magazine. The article, titled Simone Biles, Guts and Glory, looks at how she has changed the sport with her drive to be a better athlete. It also takes a deeper look into her decision to step away from several of the competitions during this year's Olympics. The magazine issue hits stores nationwide on Friday.
And you can look for so much more Olympic news in our special H&N Olympic shortcast, including what the Team USA fencing team is doing at Honolulu Hale. You have to watch the shortcast to find out. So that's going to do it for This Is Now. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a good one.